when you're looking at it, they're in the same position as they were this time last year, but it feels different because you felt like you had a better assessment of Lenore Sellers last year. I don't feel like you do right now, and to no fault of his own. I think you have the confidence in him based on last year, but is it actually going to play out how it is supposed to, or how he is capable of? You don't know.
Welcome onto the sideline, everybody. Matt Dowell and Claire Foley with you today for our South Carolina-Oklahoma football game day preview. And Claire, this was a big week. A lot of moving parts for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks, and I think everyone would agree necessary changes. But let's set the stage really quickly, because South Carolina losing at LSU 20-10 in what was an amazing environment in Baton Rouge as always. But Claire, a frustrating game because South Carolina lost this game, but it was winnable, and it was winnable once again. But the offensive line, we all watched it. They were not good. And this week, Shane Beamer, immediately firing offensive line coach Lonnie Teasley, making a change. Sean Elliott going to take over that position for the rest of the season. Claire, your thoughts on that? Because for me, this is a decision that I know is tough for Shane Beamer, but it was a necessary one.
100%. You don't want to see anybody lose their job. And obviously for the team itself, there are a lot of emotions surrounding that. But I think it was just something that had to be done. I mean, you look at that game alone, the mistakes that were being made, and it's an area that was an area of concern way back when we saw them in the spring game.
Yeah.
Like when the spring game happened, everyone said, okay, it's early, but we got to work on that offensive line. And it just felt like, obviously you hope that the team gets better every single week, but they weren't making the progressive changes that you would have hoped to have seen. Yeah. And I think that it was a glaring area of concern, especially against LSU, that it just needed a change. Like, nothing was going to get better at that point if there wasn't a change.
It just felt like the final straw, not just for Shane Beamer, but I think for everybody watching, because it was a lot of the same issues just over and over.
Right. It's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, and again, in a winnable game. Right. This and Missouri, two tough road games at night. They could have won those games, but a lot of it just came down to so many penalties for this offensive line, so many false starts. And for me, I see a lot of chatter online about Lenore is not playing well this season. He's not, he's regressed and all this kind of stuff. But for me, it's hard to judge how Lenore is playing because he has no time to do anything. Right. So I'm like, how do you evaluate what he's doing as a quarterback when he, takes the snap and it's like, 5 guys are already in his face? I don't know. I just think that it's hard, for me personally, it's hard to judge the play of Lenore Sellers because its offensive line has just been, frankly, terrible this season.
Yeah, and I think that's what's most frustrating is that, obviously in the SEC, you're playing the best teams. But it's not even that they're necessarily getting beat. It's they're beating themselves. Yeah. And it's just like, as soon as you start to get momentum, it's like, okay, penalty. All right, okay, and penalty. And it's like, you just can't get things going. And to that point, it's, I'm sure, frustrating both for Lenore's and for fans that you don't have a good assessment of your quarterback this late into the season because he hasn't been able to play how he would want to play.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, they're 3-3 on the season. The schedule is not getting any easier. I did think it was interesting that in the press room this week, Lenore's did say that with Sean Elliott, he's more hands-on, which I thought was an interesting tidbit. We can look into it as much as we want, but I did think that was a big quote. And Sean Elliott does have a lot of experience being the O-line coach. He was the O-line coach for South Carolina under Spurrier from 2010 to 2015. And in 2016 with Will Muschamp. So this is not like a new thing he's doing. He does bring experience to this role in particular. And I don't know, just from Lenore's comments, it sounds like obviously he's not happy. No one's happy that Lonnie Teasley's out of a job, but it did sound like it was maybe a renewed energy in the room.
And I think that's exactly what they need. Yeah. I think when you're at a position where so many mistakes are being made, and it's not necessarily like you need to adjust in terms of skill, it's maybe focus and attention. So to have what Shane Beamer was saying was him like literally right in there screaming, barking. He needs some way to get this group's attention right now. And if it's him literally physically there, maybe that's it. And every week I feel like I'm comparing to Clemson because that's the other team I'm covering at this point. I'm at their games. They were struggling with defense. And so what they did, they brought their defensive coordinator down on the sideline. So he's no longer coaching up in the booth. He's down on the sidelines there. And they've said they feel like they've noticed a difference, even in just like making communication easier to have someone physically there. And so if that's something that they're translating into practice for South Carolina in terms of offensive coaching and teaching, I think that can be a benefit.
Yeah, I think too for Shane Beamer, he historically doesn't fire his assistants. He doesn't fire his staff. So this was not a decision that he took lightly, obviously, but I think sometimes you just have to recognize the situation and say, we can't keep doing this. And he shared his frustrations afterwards, saying his frustration was high with the offensive line and these continued penalties. But in the teleconference on Sunday and then in the press room on Tuesday, Shane Beamer shared how the process went about making the decision to fire Lonnie Teasley, and then compared, kind of the techniques and strategies of Teasley and now Sean Elliott that he's brought in this week.
Watched the tape of the game on my iPad on the plane. And after getting done watching it, and it wasn't just from last night, it was, thinking about kind of where we are and overall body of work on the offensive line and really us as an offense right now. And looking at the overall body of work, I felt like the best decision for our team was to make a change. This isn't a, scapegoat because we didn't perform well enough offensively. He's been a part of a lot of great wins that we've had here and has directly contributed to a lot of great wins. But overall, big picture, just didn't think we were progressing and getting the most out of that unit. Too many self-inflicted mistakes that keep showing up, and felt like best thing would be just to see if we can get a spark and have a new voice in there. So Sean Elliott is going to take over the offensive line.
There's physical things from a technique standpoint. Now, how we line up and block the inside zone play, or how we line up and block the counter play, as far as who's blocking who, that's not going to change. The techniques you use to make those blocks, there's some things that maybe Sean believes in a little bit more so than Lonnie did. And there'll be some changes from a physical standpoint with that. Yes, some terminology, the mental aspect of it, there's no question about it. Trying to, calls on the offensive line, whether it be protection, run game, that Sean's more comfortable with, that we're not asking our guys to learn a new offense, but little tweaks mentally for sure. And then I think just how coaching is teaching. I believe that, a great coach is a great teacher, and being able to, there's a different voice in there and there's a different style of teaching. And I think that will help the mental aspect of it. There's no question about it. Not that Lonnie wasn't, but just I tell our coaches all the time, just find, if a guy's not getting the material, you got to find a different way of teaching it. Maybe it's drawing it on the board. Maybe it's individual meetings. Maybe it's a PowerPoint, it's video, it's whatever it might be. You got to find different ways to connect with guys. And I think Sean, just a different voice, and maybe saying the same thing, but just a different way of saying it, or a different message, and trying to make concepts even more simpler for them, doing the same thing, but just, saying it a little bit differently, if that makes sense.
So let's look at this matchup with Oklahoma, and they've had an interesting year, Claire, because breaking into the top 10, but obviously the injury to their quarterback, John Mateer, has been a big storyline for them this season. He had surgery a couple of weeks ago, but then back out there against Texas, which they lost 23-6. So he didn't look, in my opinion, super comfortable. But when you look at this Oklahoma team, they have had a great season overall, and they are known for their defense. I think Brent Venables is one of the great defensive minds in all of college football. Maybe the best defensive mind in all of college football. So their defense is, the thing about them that I think you expect to be elite on Saturday. Yeah. The offense, though, when they come to town, to Columbia on Saturday, is something that maybe South Carolina can see opportunities in. So what are your initial thoughts on this matchup?
I think it can be a concerning one when obviously you look at where South Carolina has struggled on the offensive front in terms of protection, and where South Carolina in offensive line protection is in the bottom 5 in the nation.
Yeah.
Oklahoma's defense is in the top 5.
They're in the top 5 of like every category.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's obviously a big threat as South Carolina is in this transition this week under a new coach to try to figure some things out and figure them out quickly. And that's something Shane Beamer talked about in the specific threat that Oklahoma poses on defense, and that they're just able to do a lot. But that being said, where they're facing some offensive difficulties at Oklahoma, I'm eager to see where South Carolina's defense capitalizes on that. Where maybe the defense and special teams can help support with some points.
They might have to.
Yeah. As South Carolina's offense kind of tries to continue to figure it out.
And going off of that, on the positive, and I said this in our instant reaction episode, I actually thought South Carolina's defense played exceptionally well against LSU.
That's what was so frustrating, right? Is like where you feel like you are making these wins and getting this sort of progress as the season goes on, you have these other areas that are kind of like holding you back, and it's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And so I think the defense is in a really good position right now. You just want to see that supported a little more, especially when it comes to the penalties.
I thought on Saturday against LSU, South Carolina came to play on the defensive side. I don't think you could have asked for anything else from them. It's just that the offense had nothing to kind of counter that and complement that. And so you wonder, can South Carolina do that on Saturday against Oklahoma? Again, Oklahoma's offense struggling a lot against Texas, but their defense is so good. So it's an interesting matchup. It feels kind of similar to the LSU game, how we talked about that game. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to predict what's going to happen because I think it's hard to know which South Carolina team's going to show up because I think we've talked about this, Claire, but it still feels like the Gamecocks don't have an identity.
Right.
So I don't really know what to expect every week, which makes our predictions and talking about the game kind of harder. But I think if there's one part of South Carolina that you expect to show up on Saturday, based on what we've seen, it has to be the defense. The offense is another question. With this renewed energy, can they take it to Oklahoma? But they're also playing arguably the best defense in the country on Saturday. So it's an interesting dynamic. But let's get into the series history of South Carolina and Oklahoma and what's at stake. And,
series history will be a quick segment.
Look at the series history because she is right. They have played one time in the past, and it was last season. Last year, they played in Norman, which was the first time ever South Carolina and Oklahoma football competed against each other. And if there is some positivity, Claire, South Carolina won that game commandingly, 35-9. Oklahoma, though, was having a very different season 12 months ago compared to what they're playing like now. Same for South Carolina. They were in the same position last year. They were 3-3. They went to Norman. And that game is really what kind of was the catalyst to that amazing end to the year for South Carolina when they won 6 games in a row, ended the regular season 9-3. And I know Shane Beamer said afterwards that they're trying to draw on last year as a positive. Like, hey, same position. We were 3-3. We played Oklahoma. We won and all of that. But to me, the vibes are very different because last year's 3-3 felt like a good 3-3. The LSU loss was a high-quality, controversial loss. They lost by 2 points at Alabama in what was a high-quality loss there. So the team was playing well even when they lost. Now when they're losing, they're not playing well. The confidence does not feel anywhere near the same as last year for South Carolina. So it's hard for me to kind of compare those situations. But if you're South Carolina, you say, okay, we've played Oklahoma one time. We won that game 35-9. You try and draw some confidence from that. So, Claire, with all of that being said, what's at stake for South Carolina on Saturday?
Well, just like I said before, kind of a brief what's at stake here. It would be the second straight win for South Carolina over Oklahoma. And just as I said last week, it would be Shane Beamer's 250th win as a college coach. Not head coach, obviously, as a college coach.
Yeah, and he does have history, of course, being on the staff at Oklahoma in his career, so he knows that program well, has a lot of memories in Norman. So this is another, interesting dynamic for him as a coach to play a program that he does have a connection with. But for South Carolina, again, it's hard to really predict what we're going to see on Saturday because it's just been such an up and down year. And I hate feeling negative, the podcast. So I hope we're trying to find some positivity in that. But you also have to call it as it is. And we're just, at this point, we're halfway through the season and South Carolina has shown us who they are. And now you just kind of have to hope that they prove something to all of us at this point in the season because it's Oklahoma, Bama, Ole Miss, A&M. It's a tough next month, and they have to get something together on the offensive side of the ball if they want to have a chance to win any of these games. So it's tough. But anything else you want to say before we get to our final thoughts?
I just think it's so difficult to say how you feel going into it because like you were saying before, you could say, oh, there's a lot of similarities to LSU. They were in it with LSU. This could be a close game. South Carolina could win. But also what we talked about is when you're looking at it, they're in the same position as they were this time last year, but it feels different because you felt like you had a better assessment of Lenore Sellers last year. I don't feel like you do right now, and to no fault of his own. I think you have the confidence in him based on last year, but is it actually going to play out how it is supposed to or how he is capable of? You don't know.
Yeah. I just feel like I feel like we're at the point where we're just like, I don't know.
I
don't
have no idea what to say for predictions, honestly.
I don't either. Let's just get into our final thoughts and predictions because I was trying to think of a score and
I know,
who to pick, and I'm like, I don't know.
I'm just picking numbers.
I don't know because I'm like, this game, it could be 9-6. I don't know. It's tough to pick, or it could be 24-21. I don't know. When you look at how both teams are playing, it is going to be Oklahoma's first time ever playing at Williams-Brice Stadium, which is kind of fun, for Oklahoma to come here for the first time. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to pick. Do you have a prediction? I'm still trying to figure mine out.
I have no idea what to say for South Carolina. I think that because of South Carolina's defense playing well and because it's a home game, I don't think they're going to allow too many points. I'm like in my head thinking between either 10-13 for Oklahoma, especially because last week for Oklahoma was pretty low scoring. But like we said, we don't know what South Carolina offense is going to show up, so I don't know what to say for there. I would like to say it's a game that South Carolina wins and it's 17-10, 17-13. And like, especially because I've been hopeful that South Carolina would be able to get into an offensive rhythm, and you see Lenore Sellers in the end zone a lot, but haven't really been able to see that.
Yeah, I do think because it feels like a similar dynamic to the LSU game, I do think it's going to be another one where South Carolina is going to have opportunities. The question is going to be, can they take advantage of those opportunities? Because they didn't against LSU. Will being at home help them? And it is the earliest kickoff that they've had all season. They've played night games pretty much the whole season. So they're finally playing in the day. I don't know. Does that change things for them? Will that help them maybe feel a different vibe? I don't know. So it's hard to predict, but screw it. I'm picking South Carolina 14-13. Why not? There we go. Did you want to? I
was going to pick South Carolina too because I was like, why not?
Why not? Let's do it.
I have no idea. So I'll say
it's not like we've been right every week anyway. So.
I'll say South Carolina 17-13.
All right, there we go. Well, we're both picking South Carolina. What are you guys picking? Let us know.
Can't say we're negative.
Can't say we're negative. No, it's hard. We are trying to find the positivity because you do feel kind of the fan apathy around Columbia right now with everything that's going on. So hopefully we can find some of that positivity, and hopefully this weekend will be positive for South Carolina and they will find some positive momentum because it has felt like a heavier season. And I know that's partly because of all of the expectations that they came into the year with. But it has been a tougher few weeks. So we'll see if South Carolina can kind of change that on Saturday and get a big win. It would be a big
fair
win.
Weekend.
It's fair weekend. There you go. Yeah, get there early, y'all, because that traffic is going to be crazy.
It's going to be crazy.
It's going to be crazy. And it's a 12:45 kickoff for South Carolina against Oklahoma. As always, let us know in the comments your predictions on this game, your biggest concerns. Share some positivity with us, y'all. We need the positivity. But the kickoff is at 12:45 at Williams-Brice Stadium. Excited for this one on Saturday. As always, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. She's Claire Foley. I'm Matt Dowell. We'll see you back on Saturday with an instant reaction episode from this game between South Carolina and Oklahoma. Have a good day, everybody.